Cox Business and Cox Media are proud to present you with the highlights of Doug Lipp's powerful presentation, 7 Lessons from Disney U, about leadership, culture, and legendary service. Stay tuned after Doug's presentation to learn how Cox Business and Cox Media can be your business solution.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mike Varney, President and CEO of the Tucson Metro Chamber.
Good morning, Tucson. If you've ever had a bad customer service experience, raise your hand. Yep, that's all of us. How many people have had a really, really good customer service experience? Raise your hand. Okay, and there's a big difference between the two. Traditionally, we've thought in business, we've thought that the customer is right at the top of that list of priorities, that we want to do everything we can to take care of our customers. But how often do we think about taking care of our internal customers? Those are the people in our company who are generally on the front lines, who are making those interactions with the customers that we value so much, and those customers who, who pay our freight as companies. So if we don't take care of the internal customer, pretty unlikely that we're going to be taking care of the external customer. And that's why we've invited Doug Lipp to make a return appearance here to Tucson. Anybody here in this room see Doug the first time he was here, which was several years ago? Anybody see Doug? So most of the room is seeing Doug for the first time. You are in for a treat. We very, very seldom request encore performances from speakers that we invite here to Tucson through the Tucson Metro Chamber. Doug is the exception. He's doing an encore performance for us here today, and there's one reason why, and that's because he just knocked it right out of the park the first time that he spoke here. So you are in for a treat today. Doug works without a podium, so I'm holding on to this book that's normally on the podium today. I want to thank some of our sponsors for making this event happen today. And of course, right at the top of that pyramid is Bank of America. Bank of America is our presenting sponsor. Big round of applause for Bank of America, please. Supporting sponsor is Cox Business. Big hand for Cox Business. Thank you, Cox.
Let's welcome one of the world's most respected authorities on developing cultures of significance, Doug Lipp.
There are 7 lessons, 7 key points that I'm going to bring up in my presentation today. There will be a test afterwards, so you better take copious notes as to what I'm about to talk about. But I'd like you just to have a visual to go along, and I'm a trainer at heart, so I'd like you to ponder the ideas that I share with you. Maybe take notes, maybe just take mental notes, but this is kind of the way that it's going to roll out. And I want to play with this idea that started with Van France, my mentor at Disney University, and he talked about, much like Mike mentioned in his opening comments, if we don't have a happy crew, there's no way we can have a happy show or have happy guests. And so I want to play with some ideas around this. And here is a direct quote from Van. He said, what happens backstage is what happens on stage. If we're not friendly to each other, if the break rooms aren't clean, if we're not greeting each other with smiles and good mornings and good afternoons, then we're going to have a surly attitude, and that's going to roll out on stage, or it's going to roll out over the phone lines. And certainly with social media, it spreads rapidly. We all know that. And so Van was all about putting the employee first, and if we put the employee first, they would do the same thing with our guests. So I want you to think about the precursor to great relations with your employees and the precursor to employees having great relations with our clients, our customers, our patients is trust. And how do you build trust? So I want to play with some ideas around this, and these are the 7 lessons that I alluded to earlier that are on the one sheet in front of you. And taking it to a very basic level, and this is what Van France and the founding members of the Disney University did, along with the support of Walt Disney, is that Van told us, he said, we're going to be the first stop for people being onboarded into the company, whether they are hourly employees or they're senior executives who are getting a dose of the Disney culture. Everybody's going to go through the filter of the Disney University before they're allowed into the park or into the offices. And he said, for us, we have to make sure that we as trainers or managers make life simpler for our staff. Because running a theme park is a lot of work. Creating the happiest place on earth is a lot of work, and let's not fool ourselves. So we have to make sure we hire the right people. So Van was all about hire right, train right, treat right. Safety, courtesy, show, capacity. This has withstood 60 years of competitive pressure, of changing demographics. So yes, I'm about change, and I'm also about, if you have something that works from your legacy, stay with it, or maybe alter it a little bit. But safety is number one. If you kill too many guests, they're not coming back, right? Then comes courtesy. Then comes show. How does the place, the physical plant look? The grounds, the restrooms, the break rooms, your costumes. We call them costumes, not uniforms. And least important is capacity. How many guests through the restaurants? How many guests through the stores where we're selling overpriced stuffed animals and t-shirts? That's where you make your money, but that is the least important. And if you have the long-term perspective, guests will return. Cast members will stay because you're not burning them out. Safety, courtesy, show, capacity. So I want you to think about, in your own organization, how do you bring to life those basic values? How do you simplify the inherently complex so that your employees can take care of the incessant demands, rightfully so, the incessant demands of customers who we're all living in more and more complex environments every day, keeping it simple. This leads to another concept that Walt Disney started himself, that Van France kept alive as the dean of the Disney University, and it's about plussing the show, improving the show. And I'll always remember talking to one man on his patio in Newport Beach, and he was remembering fondly when he was a ride operator on the Jungle Cruise. Anybody ever ridden on the Jungle Cruise before? Well, he was saying, I'll always remember the day that Walt pulled us off the boats. There were 7 of us on the boats as skippers. So all 7 skippers, he pulled us off, put another crew on, and took us over to the corner of the dock where guests couldn't hear us. And then he gave us blistering feedback. He said, what is your role in this ride? And we said, well, we're driving the boats. He said, and how long does this ride last? And we said, it's about 7 minutes. And he said, yeah, and it's about a $7 million investment in hardware and software to make these animals do what they do at the right time. And each one of you did not plus the show today. He said, well, let me tell you before I explain that, if you don't plus the show, you're going to lose your guests. And when you lose your guests, it's going to take many, many years to regain their trust and their confidence. Walt's parting words were, relative to the $7 million of investment in infrastructure, how expensive is a smile? Pretty cool. And he said, we practiced for the next 7 days straight, looking surprised. And the first few days, it felt forced because it was. That wasn't our standard procedure. But then something started to change, and paradoxically, by about the midweek, we started getting more energy at the end of our shift than at the beginning, because the more we engaged with our guests, they gave us more energy in return. And by the time Walt reappeared a week later, we didn't even notice when he showed up because we were so engaged with our guests. So the point here is that plussing the show, improving services, does not have to cost a thing. But all too often we have the victim mindset of, oh, I can't do it because, and you just fill in the blank with the reasons why we can't improve. So I want to build a little bit more based on that safety, courtesy, show, capacity foundation. They created some iconic words that are still alive and well, and the idea is to differentiate between when you're working, when you're off shift, when you're on shift, what's good show, what's bad show, what's good service. And so Van and his team said, let's call it that. Let's call good service good show. Let's call bad service bad show. When are you engaged with a customer or a guest? Whether it's face-to-face or electronically. You're on stage then, you better have your act together. When are you backstage? When can you let your hair down and relax? Because we all have to relax in these pressure-filled environments, especially at Disneyland and Disney World. It's a pressure-filled environment. Everybody would agree that empowerment is a good thing. Every leader that I talk to says empowerment's a good thing. But then when I talk to their direct reports, and ultimately the front lines, I get vastly different stories about what can I do, what can I not do, when do I get my head chopped off because I did the wrong thing. There is no trust. So I would argue that yes, empowerment is a good thing, but make sure you have that trusting environment that I've already talked about, coupled with effective training. And training doesn't have to happen in a classroom. It can be in 3- and 4-minute pre-shift huddles, post-shift huddles, 30 seconds during the middle of a busy day because you're a mentor and you can give an employee some feedback. Trust plus training. Trust plus training equals engagement or empowerment. This leads to the next slide, and it's really a play on of what I mentioned earlier about Walt Disney establishing trust. Walt Disney walked the park constantly. He realized that culture was more than the fanciful signs and the wonderful music. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations, in their best attempt to recreate culture or change culture when you've had merger and acquisition issues, or you've brought on different teams, or you've expanded, they might have posters up that celebrate the idea, wonderful balloons. Nothing against that. I'm all about show business as well. But if it's built on a shaky foundation, your days are numbered. And all too often I see people that metaphorically put that fresh coat of paint on a building that hasn't been assessed, and they think that brings it up to code. Sometimes you got to replace a few of the boards or some of the structural things in that building. Maybe the foundation isn't as sturdy as you thought it had been. So you might want to think about that for a moment. What is your culture? What role have you played in creating it and perpetuating it? Now, certainly, I'm a firm believer that culture always starts at the top of any organization, but it can certainly be supported or degraded at any level, and leadership comes from every chair in an organization, not just from the top. So we all play a role in creating and perpetuating culture, but the tone is always started at the top. People fall in line with the actions, the words, and the tones of those at the head of the organization. So I'm going to play with a little bit of a story now, or a little example of where Disney has made some mistakes over the years. And I want you to think about your own organization. It's about succession planning. Every great team, whether it's small, whether it's large, whether it's for-profit, not-for-profit, it does not matter what business you're in, is always comprised of dreamers and doers. Dreamers are the people that always have their eye on the horizon. They are looking at possibilities. They might be floating 30 or 40,000 feet off of the terra firma. Doers are the operations gurus who are equally creative in making these ideas come to life, and they can be perpetuated. And I'm firmly ensconced in this idea that with both you'll dominate, with one you're done. We at Disney fell into this rut like everybody else. We had our dominant hand, metaphorically, of how do we create cartoons, how do we create rides, and we're not going to let anybody else dictate to us how to make that different, whether they be families or whether they be stockholders or shareholders. We don't care. We're Disney. We know better than everybody else. So I want you to be brutally honest with yourself when you consider change. And where do you push back, you individually or you organizationally? I'm not suggesting that dropping productivity and quality is a good thing. What I'm suggesting is that third component is really what holds most of us back, is our egos. I've never managed people that way before. It's just not my style. Too bad. Try something different. Metaphorically, are you willing and able to move that pen left to right, right to left, and try some new things? So that brings me to the final lesson, my final comments about changing or perishing. And I'm a firm believer that change from within is a whole lot easier than if we wait for the outside marketplace to change us, because then I have no chance of controlling what the change is going to be. The trouble with people is we grow up. We forget what it's like to be 12 years of age. We don't take risks anymore. We're afraid to fall down and skin our knees. So try new things. Break some new territory. Maybe you'd run some beta tests. Maybe you play with some things backstage where the curtains are drawn. It's not necessarily for public consumption, but get out of your comfort zone and have some fun with evolving and changing. Again, I want to thank the Tucson Metro Chamber. Mike, your team is fantastic. Thank you all very much.
My name is Scott Lehman, and I came to Tucson in 2011 and opened Premier Auto Center on the corner of Flooring Wells and Whatmore because I saw an opportunity to bring a different kind of car buying experience to the people of Tucson. And one of the reasons I came to Tucson was because of the affordable media that was available here to help me get my message out about being a different kind of car company and providing a different experience for the customers here in Tucson. So I began using radio here in Tucson to reach my customers and let them know that they had a choice when it came to buying a pre-owned vehicle. And after about a year, I made the choice to go with Cox Media so I could reach those consumers in a whole different way with these fun, zany commercials, and Cox was absolutely wonderful to work with. So when I was just using radio, all people had was a voice to connect with me. And then when I started using TV and we could really begin to develop my character, that's when things really began to take off. Once we got on television with Cox Media, our phone inquiries, our internet inquiries went up substantially, which led to an almost 40% increase in sales. With our partnership with Cox Media, we've been able to maintain that kind of growth for 3 years now. I'd not done TV commercials before, but I can tell you Cox made it real easy, made me comfortable, always made me look good, and they produced a real high quality commercial. And because it's critical today to reach your customers no matter what device they may be using, Cox was able to offer up a digital solution for us that helped us reach our customers no matter where they were. So at the end of 2015, we opened our newest store, justtrucks.com, to give the people of Southern Arizona a better choice for their truck buying. With the opening of justtrucks.com, we had the added challenge of finding a technology service provider that could grow with us in the future. Folks at Cox Business were great to work with. Even when we had special challenges in getting the services to our building, they solved the problem every step of the way. Cox Business was able to make our remote locations seem like they were right here with us. Being a local business and the high quality of services provided to me by Cox Media and by Cox Business, all in one location and local, makes my life less stressful.
To learn more, call Larry Silver at Cox Business, 867-7474, and Mitchell Sigsworth at Cox Media, 867-7103.